Okay, in this video I'm going to take my tile map and I'm going to spawn some sprites at the location. So I've got this yellow one and these red ones. So the red ones are different sprites. They're going to be any sprites, and the yellow one's going to be a player sprite. Right, so I am going to go to my map code, and after my create tiles, I am going to create another method for, I'm going to call it spawn actors. Okay, it doesn't exist, so control, full stop, enter to generate the method. Now what this has got to do is it's got a process, so let's have a look at this. It's got to run through every character, every tile, which is a number, once it's in the tilemap, every tile, and look at them and say, right, oh, if it's an E, spawn an actor that's an enemy at that point. If it's an S, spawn an actor at that position in the tilemap. Okay, now in order to do that, we need to know what tile numbers they are. So we've got here the third character in the tile list is S, so that's character 2, and E is character 3. So we need to know those numbers. We're going to create a couple of constants. So we're going to say constant in, and we put a G to indicate a graphics tile. So that was 2. G enemy equals 3. So that's a couple of constants, so we keep this meaningful. So we need to create a double loop in order to process the 2D array. So we're going to go row, then column. So we're going to say 4, and we're going to press tab twice to build that. We're going to call it row, and the length is going to be row count. So that's a number that's been worked out. So you have to do this after you've loaded the tilemap. So we're going to press tab to do that again, and we're going to put column, and then that's going to be column count. Okay, so that's just going to let us process every single square of the tilemap. So what we need to now do to interrogate a tilemap, we use the point object. So we're going to say point p equals new point, and we're going to give it the column and row we want to examine. And then all we're going to do is we're going to say, right, okay, let's look at it. So we're going to use a switch. So we're going to say switch. We need to examine the tile at that point. So we're going to say get graphic at point P. So that will give us the graphic tile at that position. Okay, so I've just put my braces in for my switch. Then what I've got to do is just put my cases in. So I've got a case, is it a player? Just put break. So I'm just putting the cases in first. And the other one was enemy. G, N, me, and break. Okay, so I'm going to say, right, if we find a matching tile for the player, which was 2. Okay, if you just move your mouse over, it tells you what the values are. Then we'll generate a player at that position. So we're going to generate a sprite. But what we also want to do is we want to just put a floor tile at that position. So let's do that. So if we say set graphic, and the location is P, because that's the point we're looking at, and then we need to set the tile. So we could, if we look back at our tilemap data, the floor was tile 1. So I could just put tile 1 and leave it like that, and it'd be quite happy. But really, let's create another constant to represent the floor. G floor equals 1. Okay, so I can make this meaningful. So I can say G floor. And to me, that reads better. So you're saying set the graphic at position P to the floor tile. And we'll do that for both of them. Okay, so whether we're creating an enemy or a player. Right, so we want to spawn a character, a sprite character at this point. So I'll just take you through this, and I'll tell you a trick to get it to build the inheritance. Because we're going to create a sprite. It's going to inherit from sprite. So if we say sprite s equals new, and let's call it player, because that's the sprite I want. Right, I'm going to press escape so it doesn't pick one of those from the picker. And I want it to be at the position of the center of this tile. So if I say pixel position, pixel location center, it'll ask me what tile, so tile P, so we're finding the in pixels where the center of that tile is. That's what we're going to pass to the player sprite. By doing this, the engine knows, that the C# engine knows that this is of type player. So when I ask it to create it now, so I do control full stop, it says generate class for player in template in a new file, so I'll do that. It'll have created that, and you can see it's put it there, automatically in for me, and it's automatically put the sprite reference in, and it's included a couple of libraries that I need. Okay. Now, one thing that you might find a pain in the neck is this up here. It's basically said, oh, that exists in that folder. It's up to you whether you keep these. You can always just keep that part. Oh dear, my mouse isn't working well. You can always keep that part and get rid of that so that it's accessible. It depends what you're building. Some objects you'll want in more than one place, so that's up to you for that. Right, it's recorded all this extra data, so I don't want that. So I'm going to get rid of that. I'm going to rename this as start pos, and then I'm going to set the sprite up. So this is how you do a basic sprite. So first thing we need to do is add it to the engine, otherwise it won't draw. If you miss this line off, it won't exist in the game engine. We're then going to define a frame. Now, really you should use your own texture for this, but I'm going to just pull one from the texture bank, and I'm going to use, what do I normally use? Target texture. So I'm just going to use that texture, and then I'm going to set a position. So position 2D is going to be start pos. Okay, so that's the basic way of setting a sprite. Let's just see if that works. So if we just run it, so there you go. There's a floor tile, and the T's gone in. You'll notice that the enemy have disappeared as well, and they've got floor tiles, but we didn't actually activate an enemy. So that's me. That's my sprite. Okay, so that's the basic info that you need for a sprite: a texture and a position, and obviously this line to add the sprite. So let's go back to the map code, and we can now delete that. We don't want to keep a reference to the sprite, but we used it as a trick. So let's do the same with the enemy. So sprite s equals new enemy. Let's press escape to get rid of the picker. And again, we're going to give it the pixel location center of the P tile. So let's do control dot to get it to create that. So it should create that. There you go. The red line's gone. Get rid of the sprite s equals reference. Go to enemy. We don't want this. You might want to keep that, but I don't want it. Okay, so I'm going to change this to start pos. I'm then going to say gm.engineManager.add sprite. Always use the picker because of the spelling. So add this sprite to the engine. Define another frame. So I'm going to have a sinister triangle for this. Triangle. And again, I'm going to set the position 2D. In general, positions are 3-dimensional. So you've got a Z value. But for this purpose, we don't need that. I'm just going to set it to but it does. Right, so we'll run it now. And then I'll do a recap and we've finished. Run it now. Should have a lot of triangles on screen. There you go. So they're at the spawn positions from my map. Right, so let's just recap what we've done. So in the map, I've just added another method that I run after I've loaded the map because it makes use of row counts and things like that. I added some constants to represent the numerical tile numbers, okay, which were these tiles. So that was 0, 1, 2, 3. I've then set up a double loop just to process the 2D because it's just a 2D array really. And I've gone row by row, column by column, so row first, then columns. I created a point to interrogate the tile map, and I've said get me the graphic tile at that position, and I've said if it's a player tile, let's set the floor at that position and generate a player sprite at the center of the tile. And we did the same for the enemy. And then we got it to do some work. Remember, we did this. This is a little trick just to get it to do the references to the base class sprite for us. And if we press F12 over player, it'll take us to that. And that is the utter basic information that you need for a sprite. Add to the game engine, define a frame for it, set a position. Hopefully that's on screen. One last thing I'll show you to do is how to center a tile map. So after we've done this, before we spawn the actors, we can just say center tile map. And it'll ask us what region do we want to center in. Now we can just put the screen area. So we can say screen size. If we run that, we have to do that before we spawn the actor, they won't spawn in the right place. And you can see that it's centered it in the tile map. Okay, so that's spawning actors.